Recording hasn't started. Alright, well before I can start to paint, what I have to do is I have to mask off the area surrounding the main quartz cluster. It's important to do this because otherwise you may get paint on the outside area and it won't look clean and crisp and professional. And why that may not matter to some people, depending on what the picture is that you're making, such if it's like a landscape or some other kind of painting where you're painting the whole thing. I'm trying to emulate geology and mineralogy textbook illustrations, so it's important that mine have a nice, clean, crisp, clear outer area or a nice solid color outer area. So what I'm doing first is I'm building a first outer wall of blue removable painter's tape, and then onto this I will then put the removable Scotch tape, kind of like a two-fold, two-layer kind of thing. I don't always use the blue tape, but I just don't think, because I'm using thicker paper than I use often, I don't think the Scotch tape would hold it down. I think the curl and the thickness of the paper would cause it to not adhere well, and once the mask is put on, you do not want to have to re-put the mask on for any reason, because it's a nightmare. You have to leave an adequate amount of space around the outside of the picture for the Scotch tape to adhere to, or once again you'll have it peeling up and it won't be staying. So it's important that you take the time to do it correct and good the first time, so you don't have to do any repair jobs in the middle. Now this is your translucent removable Scotch tape. It's in the blue box. It's the one, because you know with the Scotch tape there's red and there's green, which is the green or the red is what most people use for everyday stuff. There's also double stick. I think it's in yellow. But what you want to look for is in the blue, and you don't want to get the cheap generic stuff. You don't want to skimp on this. This is something you actually want to get the actual Scotch transparent removable tape, because it will come off your painting. It will not leave any marks. Depending on how long you have it sealed for, you might have a little gummy residue, but that comes right off. With either an eraser or a rubber cement pickup. Notice I'm not tearing the Scotch tape, I'm making sure to cut it with a pair of scissors so that my ends are smooth and they lay down securely. Notice how I am putting the tape over part of the picture. That's because I'm going to go back through after I've taped it down and cut along the edge with a sharp X-Acto knife. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a smooth edge and rub it all down nice and smooth. Once again, making sure the tape is nice and secure. You want to use a very sharp X-Acto blade. So I'm going to try this one. I think it's pretty sharp. We'll see. I might need to change. For the straight lines, I am going to use a ruler just to make sure. Some of them I'll do freehand, the smaller ones, but the ones that are the actual angles of the tips of the quartz, I like to use an X-Acto knife and a ruler just to make sure. Yeah, this is not sharp enough. Disposing of the X-Acto knife properly. And you don't want to cut too deep though, not deep enough to actually score or cut the paper. This one almost is too deep, I think. You can because I was putting too much pressure on it to overcompensate for the dullness of the blade. That's why you want a nice sharp blade. Is you don't want to put too much pressure on it and really embed the line, because you're not trying to mark up the paper. You want the paper to stay nice, so that when you paint on it, you'll have a nice smooth consistency. As you can see, this is kind of tedious, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So it is much better to take the time and mask off the area you don't want to paint beforehand, especially if you're going to be using your picture in some sort of you're going to be using it for commercial graphic art duplication. Because if your background is nice and clean and a solid one color, it's easier to remove it in Photoshop, so that you can, often my paintings where I'm using them, so for the background, for the covers of magazines and for promotional items and that sort of stuff. And so putting them on a solid color background makes it very, very easy for me to go in and remove the background and use the mineral specimen itself in other graphic respects. This is the song. This is the song that I think is full of the gay angst.
Oh, the song is full of gay.
No. But it's always like, damn, it's so tragic. It always makes me think of like certain situations. Being a teenager and hanging out with Nathan. Maybe some recording that. It always makes me think of every time we would go to Gettysburg to visit Nathan's Gettysburg boyfriend. Even though I didn't even know Smith then, it's just like the story he's singing about is like, this reminds me of a big argument that Nathan and him got in Gettysburg over holding hands.
Okay.